Welcome back to the table. David and I are here with D.E.I, aka Divide et Impera. This is a game that I covered a while ago, back when it was in prototype form, actually.
It was a minute ago.
It was a minute ago, but now we've actually we have the full game.
Couple
and
expansions.
And we've got a chance to play with a couple expansions. So, with the new expansion on the horizon, Faith and Anarchy, which is coming out soon, we decided to kind of look back at this game as a whole and talk about kind of how to play the game, what the game is like, and also to give you an overview of what the expansions add so far, and maybe talk a little bit about what's coming in the future.
Yeah, if you know our play styles, this probably falls more into Ryan's play style than mine, but I will say these kind of games always get me in terms of like what they're doing and what they're doing differently.
Yeah.
When you start looking at factions in a game like this is a troops on the map sort of game where you're going to be doing stuff to influence what's happening on the map, collecting resources, and hopefully completing missions and scoring bunches of points. But this one does some interesting stuff, and the factions, not to mention some of the stuff that they've done in the expansions, really kind of go, it has those moments where you teach it and you're like, okay, so this faction does this, and everyone's going, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's not a hard teach, but it is one of those games, just like you said, where you teach the base rules and then you start going, okay, now let's talk about what every faction does differently.
Yeah.
And like you said, some of these factions, especially the ones that we have in front of us, are just wild factions. Well, mine was literally called the Wild. But they're just crazily different. We'll talk a little bit about that, but if you've never played D.E.I, we've got the game set up in front of you right now. Now, it's worth noting that we're using actually a setup from one of the expansions because we wanted to use the river, the Thames. Is that, am I pronouncing that right?
The River Thames. We've got the bridge here. I don't know if this is
London Old London Bridge and Big Ben out there. Big Ben.
This is from the expansion Old London, and it's one of the first pieces of content that brought with some of these cardboard miniatures that sort of add to the board. But if you can't tell, the tiles themselves, even in the base game, have these like double and triple layered sections because those kind of break off different areas or regions and create their own regions themselves.
Yeah, I'll say it's actually really neat how as you put the board together, and you can put this board together in a variety of different ways. We've got a 2-player setup here using some of those tiles with the river. But as you set them up, you start to see these organic areas start to form. So this is not a board like a normal troop on a map game where you have like pre-printed sections you're moving through. It's going to be very different every time you play. And you've got the lower areas and the upper areas. You can only move between layers in specific places. You can build elevators. You can build bridges to cross. The river gives us additional problems because you can only cross through one of these rickety old structures that maybe fell across the river that allows you to go around. But a large majority of this game is just trying to put people on the map, your faction's pieces on the map, move around. You're trying to collect resources. You're trying to take control of these outposts. You're buying new cards. And you're doing all of this stuff to try to appease the peer breeds, which are the people that kind of survived the apocalypse and now kind of control the world. They're rich. They're well off. They're sending you out to do missions by giving you missions to complete every round. And so the game is kind of centered around that idea of go out, do things, try to complete these missions. Every round you have to score one. So it's like you really do need to be focused on this and kind of use that as your goal. But the game does give you just a ton of stuff to do.
Yeah, if the purebreds, if this were a movie, the purebreds would kind of be the bad guys, I think.
For sure.
And in Old London, they're actually playable. So in the base game, they're not one of the factions. They're playable in the Old London expansion. But in any version of the game, it's kind of like a scenario-based, right? It almost feels like you just got a bunch of different boards that you can play every time you play with slightly different things. But all the things Ryan was talking about that you do out here, you're going to do on your turn by playing a couple cards. You can play a card face up to do the things on the card, and the cards have like all symbols that do all those things, putting guys out, moving them around, etc. Or you can play a card face down and buy cards from the variety of different marketplaces, which is kind of, I think, the big hook of the core mechanics of this, because you're going to get cards that are juicier versions of the cards that you have. You're going to get better cards or more options from different markets depending on how many outposts of that particular color that you control. And then there's also this over here, which is kind of a new thing too.
Yeah, there's 3 faction boards and then the black market board, which we're not using. We're actually using one of the expansion boards that came in White Death, and that is the industrial board instead, which kind of functions as a different market. One that doesn't require you to be in any particular outpost like there's a black market board if you just have the base game as well. But if you do control the outposts, you can get some of those better cards. It's really encouraging you to come out and complete these, or to take control of these outposts, because not only are you getting access to those better cards, not only are those outposts scoring you points and helping you complete missions, they're also unlocking feats on your player board. For most factions, you're going to get random feats, or you get to draft your feats. Some factions, like the one David and I are playing, have pre-printed feats that are specific to that particular faction. But the game really encourages you to go out and control those areas. And what's neat about this game, I think is neat about this game, is that it's all done via area majority. So when you're moving into a location, you have to move as many people into that location as it would require to take control of it. You're not battling it out with every move. You're not rolling a bunch of dice. We're not comparing strengths of faction total. Like, we're just looking at how many units are in that area. As long as you have more than your opponent, you control it. Of course, there's ways to manipulate that, move units in, move people out. But controlling these different areas, I mean, that is really what you're doing, the core nature of the game. It's an area control game.
Yeah, and a big part of it is, like we said, trying to accomplish these missions. You're going to be scoring points for that. And the missions are kind of one of the cool things. I think we can talk about the expansions now. The first expansion is Old London.
Yeah.
And Old London does something unique. When you use the purebreds, you interact with this mission board a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You have these tokens that you can put on the various missions face down, so only you know what's on the other side, and it's either a plus or a minus. And it basically makes some of the missions more valuable and some less valuable.
Right.
Because this mission board in the base game represents the purebreds. They are giving these missions. So this new mechanic kind of reflects the idea that you have some control over that still, which is pretty cool.
It is cool. I mean, the purebreds interact with the game very differently than other factions do. And you'll see that with all the different expansion stuff. But the purebreds, for example, don't use their own buildings. They let other players build for them, and then you can use other people's bridges, other people's elevators, which normally you can't do.
Can't collect resources normally either.
Yeah, they don't collect resources. They subjugate opponents, and they force opponents to go out and bring back more resources, because you're like cracking the whip, telling them to go get more.
They're the bad guys.
They really are. And what's really cool, I think, about them, there are these drone figures out on the board, and players can control drones. They can buy drone cards from the market. The drones that are in play are going to be based on which factions you have. Normally, any player can take control of those drones by playing those cards and force the drones to do whatever they want. However, purebreds can never be targeted by drones, no matter who's doing them.
Yeah.
If you try to target them or shoot them or take them off the board, the Boris can just say, no, these are mine. It's interesting.
Yeah, and the two other things I want to mention about Old London too. One is this Vengeance board, which is really cool. The Vengeance module, if you will, is this whole mechanic that necessitates you having Big Ben. Yeah. You can put Big Ben on the board and not use the Vengeance, but if you use Vengeance, you have to use Big Ben. And the Vengeance board includes cards that flip over that sort of have these rules or guidelines that everyone has to follow. However, you don't have to follow them. You can break these rules. But if on your turn you want to go and whistleblow on the other factions who are breaking those rules, you can go to Big Ben and whistleblow, and then they suffer some penalty if they've gone outside of those rule sets.
Right.
You won't suffer that penalty. And not only that, for whistleblowing, which is, I mean, talk about bad guys. You go up this faction this track, potentially getting some resources along the way, maybe scoring some points.
I really love this expansion module. I love this idea because really thematically, we are the different factions that should be really working together to survive, even though we are competing for space and resources. But
except for me.
Except for you. Except for that faction. But we're all kind of under the thumb of the purebreds. So having another faction go run to them and be like, that's an interesting, fun twist to the game. Again, it's completely optional. You can use it with any game.
Yeah, and the last thing that Old London brings is a campaign mode. It has basically scenarios that you can string together. So if you want to play different scenarios, but have kind of a through line through all of it, there is a campaign mode in that.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about White Death, which is the expansion I really wanted to bring in because it adds a bunch of new stuff. For one thing, it adds a bunch of new factions. 3 new factions. One that I'm playing right now, which is, like I said, the Wild, which my scrappers or troops are all wolves, and they all can run around the board. And there's pack rules if I have a pack of wolves versus lone wolf rules if I have one. I have a big wolf that I can actually use instead of a drone. I can summon and command that wolf to do different things on my turn. And I have some unique powers. So the Wild are very different. They don't build buildings. They don't do a lot. They live off of the land. And there's 2 other factions There's one, the Fawn, which kind of exists with nature, and they become the Automa faction. So you can actually play with this new Automa solo rules if you want to play against them. And then they introduced a new faction called the Psionics, which are crazy. You can actually substitute out your commander, and there's a number of different commanders. They actually function like a military unit. Like they have a lot of tactical stuff that they do based on who is your individual commander. It also introduces that board, that industrial board I was talking about. If you want to use that board instead of the black market board, I think it's cool because it adds some new minis. It actually adds like big machines. You can buy those cards and take control of those machines. Unlike drones, there's only one card for each of those in the deck. So if you buy it, you are the sole controller. It also adds mercenaries, which we're using. You put out mercenaries based on player count. I put out Mad and Max, which is actually one of like the promo mercenaries, but it was, I mean, come on, it's pretty cool.
Exactly.
A lot of little Easter eggs in this game. So those things were added, and a weather module, which you can add in. If you want to make the game even harder, you could add in this weather module, and based on the weather condition, things like moving become very difficult because it's so snowy. The machines can ice up and you cannot use elevators. There's just a lot of things that can happen to affect the game when you use the weather module. And of course, all these factions that are coming with these expansions are far more advanced than the basic ones and are kind of geared, I think, maybe towards advanced play.
Yeah, you can tell already that this is basically a kitchen sink mentality to what they're putting into this game. But like I said earlier, all those differences between the factions and these little tweaks that they've made to the game with this content really give you a massive amount of like options in terms of how you want to approach this game. And speaking of the kitchen sink, there is a new expansion coming, Faith and Anarchy.
Now,
we don't know too much about this one, not in any detail, but there are 2 factions that are included with this.
There's 2 new factions and 2 new modules at least that we know of. One module replaces or adds another board, another market board, which is equipment that you can actually like equip onto your champion, which seems, I have no idea what that's going to look like, but that seems pretty cool. And then there's a new cardboard tile, a cathedral. That relates to one of the new factions.
Like Westminster, right?
It's Westminster Cathedral, the ruins of Westminster, and you can use it either with the faction or not. But that faction is the Cult of Kronos, and they worship like this being out of time. So now we have like not just sci-fi, but also like this magical fantasy element coming into the game as well. They worship this being, and this being sends them advanced technology through time and space that they can use temporarily. It vanishes after a while.
You know, we don't know exactly how all of that takes place mechanically in the game, but we can only imagine. And the other faction are the Breachers, and these are effectively like hackers. Think sort of cyberpunk type looking characters.
I was thinking of the movie Hackers.
And they, some of the stuff that they do sounds like it's going to revolve around having a little bit more manipulation over the outposts and the drones, because that's their strength. So I don't know exactly how that's going to be implemented, but my guess is if you have played the game and you kind of like taking advantage of the drones, I don't know how it's going to come into play with the outposts.
It sounds pretty cool.
They sound very sabotagey too.
Yeah, they said they do a lot of sabotage, and also they were very out of the box thinking, which makes it seem like they're going to be twisting some of the rules even more maybe than some of the factions.
Yeah, and maybe one of the more advanced factions, but perhaps.
It's really interesting. So yeah, that is a ton of content, and we don't even actually have all of it. So, but this is what we've played with, what we've experienced. You can get it all on GameFound. They're running a campaign right now. That's a reprint of all the old stuff and some of the new stuff that's coming out as well. So this is your chance to get everything if you're brand new to the game, and if everything we talked about today seems interesting to you. But if you want to know more about it, you can take a look at their campaign page, come to our Discord, of course, leave comments below. We'll do our best to answer them as soon as possible. And until we see you again, keep having fun at the table.